and it will be recorded. Deliberation of issues will only be conducted by private security and private investigations policy committee members unless permitted by the chair. Individuals who engage in disruptive behavior that impedes official business will be asked to stop being disruptive or leave the meeting. Additional measures may be taken to have disruptive individuals removed if their continued presence poses a safety risk to the other persons in the room or makes it impossible to continue the meeting. Per HB 211, we are now on YouTube versus Facebook, and are we up and running on YouTube yet? Good. Going introductions, we will start with you, all right?
Oh. Introduce yourself first, Chair.
I was going to go around to you last.
Okay,
Yeah.
save you for the last, all right. DPSST staff, Susie Green.
Jennifer Howell, DPSST Administrator, Rules Coordinator.
Chantal Hawes, I'm DPSST staff.
Emma Detweiler, DPSST staff.
Shelby Wright, Executive Assistant, DPSST.
Samantha Cosa, Executive Assistant, DPSST.
Elena Snyder, private investigator, OSB appointed.
Welcome.
Michael Holsapple, DPSST compliance investigator.
Ben Hamilton, DPSST compliance specialist.
Dan Linson, I'm representing private security industry and the chair of this fine group, and we can go online. Do you want to call them out?
Yes. So online, if you would introduce yourself after I call your name. Member Bauer. Member Bauer, can you introduce yourself, please? Member Krieger?
Scott Krieger, Northwest Natural.
Member Herrera?
Raul Herrera, Alarm Monitor Representative.
Member McGee?
Tom McGee, Retail Representative.
Member Schranz?
Samantha Schranz, Private Investigator Representative.
And Member Nakasone?
Nate Nakasone, Unarmed Representative.
And then staff that are online?
Kathy McAlpine, DPSST Professional Standards Division Director.
We missed Alex Stone.
You missed out.
Member Stone?
Alex.
Hospitality. Great to be here.
Sorry.
Are we having problems with the feed?
We're working on it, but you're good to go.
Okay, so YouTube's not working right now.
The YouTube is working, we just don't have video on it, so we have audio.
Okay, we got audio. Okay. Fabulous. Moving on, right? Okay. We are moving on to the approved meeting minutes from November 28th, 2023. We need a motion. Anyone?
Elena Snyder, for the record, I make a motion to approve the minutes from November 28, 2023.
Thank you. Do you have a second?
Scott Krieger, I second.
Samantha?
Actually,
Oh, sorry. Sorry.
Chair Linson?
Aye.
Member Bauer?
he's still having audio difficulties. I don't see. He's still having the audio. So we can skip over him for now.
Member Krieger?
Aye.
Member Herrera?
Aye.
Member McGee?
Aye.
Member Nakasone?
Aye. Aye.
Member Schranz?
Aye.
Member Snyder?
Aye.
Member Stone?
Aye.
Motion passes.
All right, so moving on to item number 3 on the agenda, proposed rule changes for the Oregon Administrative Rule. OER 259060010, and it will be presented by Jennifer Howe. This is related to executive managers.
Thank you. I'm Jennifer Howe, for the record. So today we have a proposed rule for your consideration related to the executive managers who are providing contract services. Just to go back and give the complete overview. A business, employer, or entity may contract a person to be their executive manager. And the executive manager is a person who is authorized to act on behalf of that company or business in manners relating to the licensure or certification of the private security providers. Private security executive managers have the unique authority among private security providers to contract their services. When executive managers were first granted the authority to contract their services, there were questions on whether there should be limits to those numbers of businesses that they can contract with. And at the time, it was determined that would be something that DPSST would monitor and bring forward to address if there were any issues that were identified. Recently, DPSST noted that when an executive manager has a high number of contracts, there are increased certification deficiencies and issues, and those adversely impact the individual private security professionals, the businesses or entities that are contracting with the executive manager, and the workload for DPSST staff. So you'll probably recall from the August conversation, August 15th, 2023 PSIPC meeting is when we first brought this forward for you all to review and discuss. And the committee talked about 2 different solutions in that meeting. The first solution proposed adopting a limit on the number of contracts, but including an opportunity for an exception to that limit when the executive manager is in good standing. And the second solution that you all discussed was a limit, using the limit as a compliance measure that DPSST would only impose when there were compliance issues. All right. DPSST reviewed both options and recommends pursuing the first solution, which is limiting the number of contracts for all executive managers. Adopting a limit on the number of contracts will set a minimum standard for the industry as a whole. The draft rule change shown on page 3 includes a proposed limit of 10 businesses or entities at any one time. And as recommended by the Private Security Policy Committee, the draft rule includes an option to request an exception to that limit. We did prepare some fiscal impact statements that are also included in your memo. The rules do not have a fiscal impact on the department, the board, other state agencies, units of local government, or the public. There may be a fiscal impact to some executive managers, and executive managers may also be considered small businesses. So setting a limit on the number of entities an executive manager can work for could impact an executive manager's business income. DPSST estimates that this would impact fewer than 5 licensed executive managers, and there's still an opportunity for an executive manager to petition for an exemption to that limit. That's the overview, and there are action items on page 4. Staff are here, and we can answer any questions that you all have. If you didn't have questions or didn't have any further discussion, then you could affirm just by discussion the fiscal impact statements, or you could amend them, and then there's the opportunity to vote on it.
Well, my impression is that we will have some discussion on this from somebody. How do we go about calling on that?
It's turned over to you,
right.
and yep.
So, what? Yeah, was that? Okay. So, for anybody online, it looks like, for here, well, Board Member Schneider, because we're the only ones here. Anybody else online, is there any discussions from y'all? Looks like Nate, you have some?
Well, just a couple of questions right off the bat. First of all, I don't know if anyone else on Teams is experiencing it, but the room is a little bit, everyone in the room's a little bit echoey. I think I'm tracking on what everybody's saying, but first question is, what was the holdup on the agreement between the executive manager and DPST, or where did that come from in the research that was done?
Thank you, Jennifer Howell, for the record. So it was just looking through the different authorities that DPSST has, and DPSST primarily has the authority to deny, suspend, revoke. So any other work would be done through a mutual agreement, and there's no guarantee that the other party would enter into that mutual agreement.
Nakasone for the, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to finalize that if they refuse the agreement, then there would be the continued efforts of compliance and investigation, and it would further increase the staff time and the impact that has.
Okay, excellent. Nakasone for the record. Next question is, what would the parameters and qualifications be for receiving the exception?
Sure. Susie Herring for the record. Nothing has been established yet, Nate, on that, but what I think that we would look at is what the history that provider had with us, what complaints we had in the past, and how they handled the contracts with those entities in the past. So we don't have anything established at this point, but once we get to that, we will start establishing that.
So,
Nakasone for the record, I got a couple of follow-up questions, but I don't want to dominate the floor, so.
Sure, if I may just add to that. I had staff look into the numbers so that you could have that. This came before you when Jennifer had designated the timeline for that because of the individual that we had that had a numerous amount of contracts with multiple entities, and it's become a compliance issue for the unit, and being able to go through that process and investigate every single compliance issue. It's taken a lot of staff time to do that. But in running the numbers of who we have currently, we have a total of 25 executive managers that are currently, let me back up, 26 managers that are currently contracting their executive license out. And I have one individual that is at 9 and the other are 5 or below. But we do have one individual on the list that's at 61, if that gives you a perspective of what we're looking at.
I can't see whose hand is up.
Val.
Val. Mr.
For
McKee.
the record, just a quick question on that. You mentioned the one individual that has 61. Under the new rule change, he would be limited to doing 10, or be required to bring in other executive managers to fulfill those roles. With that being said, how is this going to fall into the entity requirements now of him having to bring on another employee and falling under the entity requirements? Or does that have anything to do with this?
Hearing for the record, yes. Good point, Al. I think, and I may turn it over to my experts here, but my understanding that this individual would not be able to do some of those current contracts based upon the entity licensing requirements. I'm going to turn it over to Michael to make sure that I'm stating that correctly without stating who they are.
Depends on how he sets it up. If he sets it up where he's overseeing other managers that are contracting their services, then I think we would still have an issue with that because you'd still have a company with more than 10 companies. I think the intent of the rule change is to get away from having so many companies under one company. Contracts between companies when you have an executive manager that's contracting his license, he's doing it under his own LLC typically. If you hire on more executive managers onto that company in order to see a vast number of companies, yes, you are running into the entity issue because now you have employees. B, we're not fixing the issue that way because now you still have one company overseeing multiple companies, if I understand your question correctly, Al. Mr. Reed, sorry.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was trying to clarify. Especially if this person, that's his sole business is doing that. Now that's going to affect his income, his sole business, proprietorship. Is he going to be able to afford, if he brings on other executive managers, is he going to be able to now afford the cost of the entity changes and things of that nature? I understand it's a one-off situation, and I understand going away from that, and I think that's a good idea because you can't give the time that's needed, the quality time to stay on top of those things if you're handling that many. And being the one-off, I think that's a one-off situation that probably would have to be discussed with DPSST and that individual. I was just wondering how that was going to affect with the new entity changes.
So am I understanding this right? This person who has a lot will only be able to do 10. Is that final answer? That was funny. So they will not be able to have sub-EMs managing those others. Is that correct?
They could, well, the way that the rule is written, they could ask for an exception. So we could certainly look at the extenuating circumstances surrounding that.
Okay. Any other questions?
Nakasone, for the record, I got a couple of follow-up questions. Let me just preface with I got some comments about my position on it. And I'm generally never in favor of putting a cap on anybody's form of business. I think we definitely need to remember that we, unlike other, government entities that are regulated, are a for-profit industry. That's not to say we're all out there being greedy, but I think we need to protect that for-profit aspect of it because, if we can't make money to put food on the table, then our industry suffers and eventually goes away. I'm generally not in favor of putting a cap, but it seems to me that we've got one bad actor who's over 10 in excess quite significantly. And without revealing this one person's business, if DPS can comment on what's the motivation? Is this person doing this for profit? Is he billing out, 61 times or whatever it is? And it also seems to me that putting the cap, if that just is this one person, doesn't necessarily seem to address the overall issue of the amount of deficiencies that are coming in. So if Susie, I don't know if you can speak to kind of how that lightens up the workload, which I'm all in favor of lightening up the workload.
Sure. Thank you, Susie Herring, for the record. So I do want to just make sure that there's an understanding of what we're trying to do here with this rule change. I wanted to make sure that Nate, that you didn't have the opinion that this cap was on someone running their business and having contracts. That's not what we're looking at. It's the individual contracting their executive manager license to multiple businesses. So if that individual could potentially have 50 businesses that they contract themselves and employees with. We're not setting a cap on what a business can, or a number that a business can contract with. I wanted to make sure that was clear. This is just the actual individual contracting their entity license, their executive manager license. Talk about entities all the time, I'm sorry. Contracting that executive manager license out. So I wanted to make sure that was clear. the trouble that we've come across with this one particular, and I hear you, it's an anomaly, it's one individual, is that not necessarily just the individual contracting that license out to the business, but the amount of compliance issues that surround it, which equates to potentially civil penalties that may come before the policy committee of the board that may or may not be getting paid, and the staff time that it takes to go through that. Right now, this individual has the 61 active contracts that we know of, and definitely that potentially could change with getting set up with the entity licensing. What was your other question? I'm sorry.
Is the workload issue on you guys a result of this one individual, or is it kind of multiple that are approaching these with compliance investigations, approaching that cap of 10 or the potential cap of 10?
Yeah, good question. So it is the one individual, unfortunately, and what it is it's the multiple contracts with, let's say this individual's contracting with 20 businesses right now, and that those 20 businesses are working people without certification. And this executive manager is not holding those individuals responsible by going through the process of getting them licensed and trained and putting them through the application. So it more or less seems like a moneymaker that this individual is just kind of putting their stamp and their name on this business, but not holding the providers accountable and getting them through the process as they should be. So those individuals end up being out of compliance. And as a reminder, when we did look at this original rule to allow the contracting, this was something that the policy committee discussed, that we would revisit this when it became an issue, and had a conversation about it, and it hasn't come up until now.
And Nate, did that answer all your questions?
Definitely, yeah. So it's not just a compliance issue with the EM, but it's all the subsequent compliance issues caused by the individuals.
Correct.
And let me editorialize, because I know some of these people, they rubber stamp their PS20s. They just get folks out there without actually going through their any classes or certifications or any sort of credentials. They just get warm bodies out there, and that's not really what we're looking for. And that's what happens with these people that are running, and they're jacking their price, and they're saying, no, I'll be your EM. But it's the statute and rule requires that person is responsible for a bunch of different things, not just putting their name out there and getting their money. So that's my editorial. Any other thoughts, any other input before we move to a vote?
Can I just ask one question? I'm sorry, I'm driving, so I can't operate my phone to raise my hand, but this is Scott Krieger. If this individual is doing all these things, isn't there an investigative and potential disciplinary action against that person for violating the rules of being an executive manager?
Susie Herring, for the record, yes.
Okay.
I'm sure everybody's doing the same thing. Why is this guy getting away with it, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of where I was going. Is that I understand the meaning for the rule, and I'm tracking with you. I'm never a fan of making a rule to address one situation.
Oftentimes, that's how rules are. It's the few that create rules for the many, unfortunately. And the way that these things work, and because unfortunately I do know some of these people, they operate under the radar for years and years and years, and the standards get compromised, and then many of the industry employees believe that this is how the things are done, and then they go to someplace else and they find it's not done that way. So when that standard is compromised, then a lot of work ends up backlogging. So the belated issues are 2, 3, sometimes 5 years down the line, where the problems really rear their ugly head. So if this is a limitation, I think that we'll find out what the rest of the board believes. And if they agree with this, then we'll move forward. Calling for a motion?
I make a motion to close the discussion.
You have a second?
Second.
Do you have a motion to move forward with this?
I make a motion to move forward on a vote.
Okay, there we go. And
I would second.
All right. Call for vote. Names. You have something else?
Is it a vote for approval?
Okay, yeah, because I floated out two things, didn't I? Okay, so we have let's first deal with this vote to stop conversation. Alex, you put that forward, we can vote for that.
Okay.
No?
Sure, wait.
Why don't you just move
Sure,
forward?
you don't have to vote to close the discussion there. You can just call for a motion, but just ask for the consensus on the fiscal, the fiscal impact, which is, just need a consensus. It can be like a nod of heads.
You see I'm getting coached over here, so, because I'm just the volunteer. I'm calling for consensus. Affirm or amend the fiscal impact statements prepared by staff, and then we call for.
It's just, Chair, it's just a consensus, so if we can get like a nod of heads.
Nod of heads, thumbs up, or yay for those, Scott, who are traveling. Did we see that?
Chair, you're good to go forward.
Okay, we're good to go forward. All right. Thank you for coaching me.
Sure.
This is fun. At least I'm, going, all right. Sometimes I don't know all the protocols, because I come from Bob's Rules of Order, not Robert's Rules. So. Don't start. So item number 4. Well, Eddie cracks jokes too. Vote number 2, recommend the Board of Public Safety Standards and Training approve filing the proposed rule change as the permanent rule. So now we go for a motion.
A motion in a second.
A motion in a second. All right, so now we can go for a motion.
Motion to vote on the rule change for OAR 259-060-0130.
I'll second.
Is that a motion to approve, Alex? And is that a second to approve?
I second the approval.
Now we call for vote.
Okay, so this is for the motion for proposed rule changes for OAR 259-060-0130. Chair Lindzen?
Aye.
Member Bauer?
Aye.
Member Krager?
Aye.
Member Herrera?
Aye.
Member McGee?
Aye.
Member Nakasone?
Nay.
Member Schranz?
Aye.
Member Snyder?
Aye.
Member Stone?
Aye.
Motion carried.
All right, not anymore? All right, cool. The proposal changes for Oregon OAR, Chapter 259, Division 59, adopting the permanent rules for the private security entity licensing program. Drum roll, please, Jennifer Howell.
Thank you, Jennifer Howell for the record. So we're here today to discuss approving the permanent rule changes for the private security entity licensing program. And just a steps back on where we are, the overview of the rulemaking process so far. You'll recall last year we filed the first batch of the proposed rule changes and we received public comments. Those public comments led to additional changes to the rules. So we implemented those changes, adopted them as temporary rules, and then refiled the proposed rules so that there was an opportunity to comment on the changes that were made. So we're still under the temporary rules. Those are in effect so that the program can operate lawfully since the regulation went into effect on January 1st. And the proposed rules went through public comment. We did receive some comments and they were attached in attachment A for the policy committee to review. Your memo also includes attachment B, which is the complete rule set, and it includes final text for permanent rule changes. There were a few changes in the permanent rule version that were not reflected in the temporary and proposed rules. Just on a high level, the version that you have for the permanent rules will maintain the temporary authorization process when an application and the fees are received, meaning DPSST will issue the temporary authorization after the application and the fees are received, allowing the entity to continue to operate, and then for DPSST to work with the entity on anything within the application. We've found that that is especially important right now because the Department of Revenue is backlogged with their natural business of tax season. And it's a challenge to get through the request for the certificate of tax compliance. We did remove from the application rule language that created an unintentional public records request to BOLI for wage claim documentation. That was never the intent to have documentation added unless there was information that needed to be disclosed. So the application form and the process are updated.
Yes.
Yeah, are updated to reflect that it's through disclosure and attestation. And then if DPSST needed additional documentation, they would work with the entity to obtain that. There was additional cleanup in the professional workplace training rule. Just to clarify that it is the one training that is offered for that process. And then some additional clarification to the character competence. I call it CCR now, I can't remember the third word. Reliability. Thank goodness. I've been shortening it so much. The CCR investigation, and then the matching changes to the denial and revocation rule. So that is just the broad overview, and of course we would turn it over to you, Mr. Chair. Staff are here for questions and the committee's discussion. But ultimately, DPSST recommends that the policy committee approve these permanent rule changes with a recommendation for the board to approve the rules. Sorry.
So the department recommendation, and I'll read it. The department recommends that the PSIPC approve a recommendation from the board on public standards and training to adopt the final text version of the rules for the OAR Chapter 259, Division 59, as shown in this attachment B as the permanent rules for private security entity licensing. So our action item, vote on PSIPC recommending it to the board on public safety standards and training to approve this adoption of the final text version of this as shown in the attachment B as permanent rules. Is that correct? Is that what we're asking for?
Chair, that is correct.
Okay, but
Certainly open it up for discussion.
Yeah, that's so. Just wanted to narrow it down so we're focusing our conversations on this. So I went ahead, so we can go back. So now we're asking for any conversations on this. Did you have any conversation on this? Who is that?
That's Al.
Is that Al? Hi. Go ahead, Al.
Just for the record, just a clarification on the tiers. What were the final tier levels as far as how many employees?
Yep.
I know we talked about a number of 1 to 5 being a certain category, 5 or more. It talked about 4 tiers. What were the final tier levels?
Thank you, Al. Jennifer Howell for the record. In attachment B, it's page 17. The rule number is 259-059-0130. After your discussions in the previous committee meeting and doing some balancing, the rule says $5,000 for an entity that has 10 or fewer. $10,000 for an entity that has 11 to 20. $20,000 for an entity that has 21 to 50. And $30,000 for an entity that has 50 or more.
This is a sweet spot. There's gotta be conversation on that, I'm sure. Or do we drain the conversation also? Love it. And so I am going to belabor that point though, because I know that there's probably somebody in this room. Okay, see if you bring this up. Go ahead. Who's that again?
Ben Jones.
Is that Ben? Go ahead.
I was looking over the final version of these rules, and I do like the carve outs that we were able to create. But I still feel like it's overbroad in a lot of different ways, especially the insurance requirement and the burden that's going to place on small entities. And as looking through the public comments, there's no carve out for large entities either who can obviously pay their wages. So I personally still feel like this effort has been rushed and that there needs to be more work on this before we go to a final rule. I think it's going to have a significant impact on both large and small entities, and we need to be very cautious about rushing forward with something that's going to paint everything with such a broad brush.
Any other comment from our board? So I'm going to ask y'all to think about those groups that you are representing. Do you think that there's any other questions that they would want to ask before we go to this next step?
Can I make a motion? Is that okay? Can I make a motion? Can I make a motion to go to vote one rule at a time, one rule change at a time, to possibly pass some of these rules today, rather than take a vote on all the rules at one time?
What's the
board?
What's the state wants to do?
Well,
They want it temporary by the beginning of the year, right?
Chair, it is currently temporary. This is for the final proposed rules that will be presented to the board in April. Jennifer, did you break it out to them individually in the document they received for each rule that had changed, or was that just in the memo?
The memo identifies the changes that were made from the temporary and proposed to the permanent version. It doesn't show the red line changes. Well, it would be easier to identify that people still have people have opposition to.
Right.
And whether or not there's
Alex, did you have any specific questions on any of the specific rules?
No, I'm ready to take a vote. But I don't want to make a motion if we can't pass this with the majority. But I am willing to make a motion to break up each rule into an individual vote and to vote each rule one at a time and to pass as many as possible today. That's my motion, if the board allows. If we're able to do that. Or we can just take a vote up and down and see if we can pass this final version, and maybe it'll pass. Maybe I have a second motion.
So,
but
I would second your first motion, Alex. If we got there.
I would agree with that. I think there's more discussion that needs to be had before we make a final decision to pass this up to the board. This is way too broad, and I don't think they're considering all the impacts completely. And I would agree with Ben at the same time that we need to have further discussion. We can't be rushed by the state to make a decision on this.
So Ben's got overbroad, no carve out for large, and a significant impact for small and large. So, Al, what were your thoughts on anything else, any specifics that, I just want to get a feel for the group before we actually call for a motion, et cetera. I see you, Scott.
Well,
So,
I agree with Ben. You know, there are impacts that are going to happen. Larger corporations can easily pay this with no problem. Smaller corporations are going to have a hard time. There's still issues like what Ben brought up in the very beginning with some nonprofits that will be pretty much out of business having to follow these standards. I just think there's more discussion that needs to be amongst this group to talk about these things. I would agree with Stone. There are some things that are in here that we all agree on. There's other things that are open for discussion. I think before we go to a permanent vote, you know, as to accept this or not, that we need to have those individual discussions on those topics.
So you're saying we should have a conversation about nonprofit. Okay, so I'm just trying to get a straw poll at this point. See where we're going.
Sure.
And what you had some thoughts?
Susie Herring, I can answer that question. So nonprofit was not an exemption with House Bill 2527, so the regulation does apply and doesn't allow the agency to make any sort of exceptions for those individuals. I just spoke with Jennifer. I was trying to figure out, we have the current temporary rules in effect until May 28th. We need to get the rules to the board for a permanent rule in April. And we would take them as whatever the outcome is here, whether it's a yay or a nay. We would take those forward to the board. But if there's a specific rule that one or any of the committee members want to pull out of this motion and have a discussion about that specific rule, but we have received all public comment thus far and have not needed to make a change to the current proposed permanent rules.
Okay.
As they're written.
Got it. I'm going to call for a motion on a vote on this department recommendation.
Scott go first.
Oh, Scott, I'm sorry. I said I saw you. Go ahead.
That's okay. Sorry, I'm pulled over now, so I didn't raise my hand while I was driving. I think, and just where my question comes from is, I think that handling some of these challenges and these liabilities through the attestation process has been a good way to get many people through the process. But I'm concerned with some of the other concerns that were raised about some of the other requirements and some of the my company's an example of one that is waiting for DOR stuff that was submitted very timely and we can't get it back, and it's put us in a tough position. And those are and we're a larger company, and to be able to attest to these things is kind of a no-brainer. And so I think that that's my personal experience, but I also think that from the other end of the spectrum, some smaller companies are probably being adversely impacted by this as well.
Did you have any comment to that, staff?
Susie Herring, at least I wanted to address a couple. The DOR issue, we're well aware and understand that and are working with waiting to get that information back from yourself when we're needing the confirmation of that. That's okay. We've been having day-to-day conversations with DOR, so that shouldn't be an issue as far as individuals being able to be in compliance and allowing them to work on a temporary work permit. The other piece to the attestations, they become an issue when the compliance staff is looking at the character and reliability. So someone may sign off on that, but that doesn't mean that they don't have to prove that or provide further information or documentation as requested by staff. So we will reach out and ask for that information if needed. And some of the things that I've been hearing that have come up are not something that DPSST can necessarily change based upon the way that the bill was written. That may take a legislative change down the road.
Any other comments here? Ben, go ahead.
I just want to point out to my other committee members that the public comment on this has been overwhelmingly negative, other than the people who are directly supporting this bill. So I just want to make that known before we go to a vote.
Okay, so eyes wide open. We on this board should know what the statute is on this side of this. So I am calling for a vote from a motion regarding the department recommendation that they recommend the PSIPC approve the recommendation to the board on Public Safety Standards and Training to adopt the final text version of the rules for the OIR Chapter 259 Division 59 as shown in this be as the permanent rules for the private security entity licensing program. Is there a motion?
Chair, I make a motion to recommend to the board the adoption of the final text version.
Is there a second?
I second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Call for vote.
Okay, this is regarding the proposed rule changes for OIR Chapter 259, Division 59. Chair Linzen?
Aye.
Member Bauer?
No.
Member Krager?
No.
Member Herrera?
No.
What was that? That's good. Can you repeat, please?
Can you hear me? No.
Thank you. Member McGee?
No.
Member Nakasone?
No.
Member Schranz?
Passes.
Member Snyder?
Aye.
Member Stone?
Aye.
Motion failed.
Okay, next steps at this point.
So you can call for another motion for them to make another motion that passes, but we can get to the board with what we have.
Copy that. Well, just a couple of bases, yes. Let's call for another motion to make a motion to pass this or to vote on this, sorry.
I would like again to make a motion to vote on each individual specific rule change rather than having one vote on all of these rules in one vote. We vote line item by line item. I think we can pass the majority of these if the board would allow. I don't know if you can. I don't know. I'm not trying to put blame anywhere. I'm just trying to get some stuff done.
Let's do that so we can identify where the issues are. But instead of a roll call vote, if we can create a consensus agenda, like say, we'll go to each rule. So the first rule is 259.059.010, the definitions. And so if there's that one is ready, we'll mark it as ready, and then what we'll do is we'll vote. We'll figure out where the issues are. Let's do that first.
So if you want to withdraw the motion and then move forward with a consensus format on this, do you have a straw poll on that consensus? Yes? No? I'm good.
Okay. All right. So let's.
Yeah. I make a motion to vote to approve the definitions, at least to get a consensus. Sorry.
Do you mind if I drive? Okay, all right, so we had consensus on 10 for the definitions. The next rule, I'm guessing everybody's had a chance to open up attachment B at this point. 259.059.0020, the private security entity license is required. So if there's opposition, be sure to yell out your opposition, but otherwise we'll thumbs up for consensus. Okay. All right. So not hearing a no. 25905900030. Entity representative required, entity representative responsibilities.
This is specifically to wage, correct? Pay wages?
This is not paying wages. This is the private security entity must designate an entity representative. And the entity representative is responsible for completing the exam, signing and submitting the application, providing notice to the department about changes, being that primary communication person for the department, and then what to do if the entity representative changes. So it's page 4 of attachment B. Okay. Seeing consensus so far. Page 5, 25905900040, the period of licensure and the temporary authorization form. So DPSST has established that the normal period of licensure is July 1st through June 30th, and everyone has to reapply before July 1st of each year. And then when we receive an application, we have that temporary authorization form that we can issue if the application is incomplete and the license can't be issued right away. Not hearing any opposition.
I have a little bit of a problem with this one. Having to reapply every year is going to be quite an administrative burden, especially because all of our other certifications are 2-year.
I would agree with what Ben just said as well. Why are we focusing this as a 1 year when everything else is 2 year?
I can help answer some of those questions. Jennifer Howell for the record. As the agency prepared this and wanted to roll it out, the first identification was just the amount of fee itself, the fee for the license and administering the program. And being able to split that fee up into each year and do a single year license was a lesser fiscal impact to the agencies as we rolled out the new licensure program. So to go to a 2-year license, you'd be doubling the amount of the license fee right out of the get-go. It also helps balance the revenue that's received throughout the biennium for the program. It also helps support the legislative intent behind the employee protections in ensuring that the entities are complying with providing the training, providing the statements, that they have their proof of ability to pay wages still in line at each time. So those were some of the reasons why. Ben, you had your hand up again?
Yeah, Ben Bauer for the record. I understand that. I still think it's going to be a lot of work all the way around, both for the companies and for DPSST. I'm wondering if it would be possible, if it's a fiscal thing, if it could still be a 2-year cycle, but you have to pay part of your fee every year. So that way on the in-between years, you just pay the fee and you don't do any paperwork, and you do your paperwork every 2 years, if that would be a viable solution.
Alex Stone for the record. Alex Stone for the record. I would even be okay with paying 5 years in advance to not have to do paperwork every year. So maybe if there's like a 1, 2, 3, 5 option, we would still be subject to, oversight. If people wanted to see our records, you could always ask for the records. But if there was a 5-year option, that'd be amazing. Just saying. Thanks.
Oh, another hand from Ben.
Ben Bauer for the record, just to piggyback off Alex, yeah, maybe that's how we can help do this is we have a requirement that we have to maintain proof that this stuff did occur. So if it's a complaint driven process, DPSST can look into our records and we have to show that we have these things, but not have to actually apply every single year or have like a 5-year process like Alex suggested or something like that. I'm just thinking it's going to be a lot of work for everyone every year.
Okay, so we don't have consensus on 40. So that one is not, that needs a flag. 2059050, the examination for licensure.
Ben Bauer for the record, is this separate from an executive manager license, or is there a way to put them together, or is this going to be 2 different tests that an executive manager is going to have to do if they're also like entity person?
Sure, thank you, Ben. Yes, Jennifer, for the record, these are 2 separate requirements. This is the entity's requirements demonstrating that they have the knowledge as the entity and about their responsibilities to prevent sexual assault, sexual harassment, and discrimination in the workplace. So this is a requirement for the entity representative to complete. And not all businesses will have the executive manager who is also the entity representative. In some cases that, or in most cases, that should be the principal partner or principal owner of the entity. Al?
So my question is, you're saying it's the principal person. To me, this is just basic standard procedure for sexual harassment in most businesses. Is there going to be some type of requirement for them to show that their staff has gone through this as well, or is it just for the principal person?
The examination for licensure is just for the entity, and the person who's going to be fulfilling that role for the entity is the entity representative. Now later on, you'll see the rules for the requirements for the entity to make sure that their employees are receiving the training, and that's the professional workplace training. So that's under a separate rule.
So this is basically just showing that they've demonstrated that they understand what the rules and policies are when it comes to sexual harassment, and that they have something on file showing that they've completed that.
The business, yes. The business is taking the test through Workday and creating that completion of certificate of the exam and providing that with the application. So it's only the entity representative who's taking this examination for licensure, not the individual private security providers.
And not the executive manager with that entity.
Correct. Ben?
Ben Bauer for the record. I think overall I'm okay with this, but I think going forward it would be nice if there was more overlap between people who are both executive managers and the entity representative, because otherwise it's once again a lot of stuff you have to keep track of, and there's a lot of overlap already. So if there would be a way to streamline that going forward for those people who do fulfill both roles, I think that would be really good for our constituents.
Alex, for the record, I am both. I've played both those roles in my company, and I don't think there's anyone. There's no rule barring that you can't do both, for sure, right? Board. So I think that's not a real. It's not a hurdle. People can choose to do both. I will say my concern has been I've attempted to take the test for 2 weeks and I can't get someone from Workday for DPSST to. They'll call me. I'll be in a meeting. I'll call them back. No one answers. They call me. I call them, and so people actually need to be able to take the test. But I'm voting in consensus because it's a one-time test. You don't take the test every year. It's just for your initial entity representative licensing exam. That's correct. So I'm good with this. I think we can get consensus on it, but for me, it's about being able to actually make sure that you can take the test.
Certainly. I will note for the record that the exam is required every year with the application for license. Because while the entity might not change, their entity representative could change from year to year.
Is there allowance for accessibility of learning issues, testing issues?
The individual would just need to contact DPSST.
So there is allowance for them? Yeah.
So hearing the information about in the future trying to find opportunities or ways for executive manager dual roles, and being able to consolidate processes. Other than that, as a future marker, I see Al's hand, and then we'll find out if there's consensus.
I'm for it all. I just got one last question to piggyback off of what Stone said. If an entity is doing both, and when it's time to renew, is there a clause that could be put in there if it's the same entity, he does not have to take that test again? Only if the entity changes, would they require to do a new test? Because ultimately the test is going to be the same, and if the entity has already taken it and then a year later he has to take it again, it's going to be the same thing. So if it's the same entity, he should be allowed just to be not required to take that test again. But if the entity changes, then that person would be required to take the test.
Or once every 5 years.
You like this 5-year thing.
I just want to get it done and pay and get it done with.
Yeah.
Take my money, enjoy it. Future budget money right there.
Okay. Sorry, just making some notes here. It's within our full line. Yeah. I think that, would you be fine if we just amended that? Okay, so can we have consensus on Rule 50, the examination for licensure, with an amendment to allow that if the private security entity representative already took the exam, like that there's no change to the entity representative, that they don't have to take it when the license is renewed? Okay. All right, so 50 is amended. Okay. Thank you.
Susie Herring for the record. I at least want to get on the record, if there was a law change related to sexual assault, sexual harassment, or discrimination in the workplace, and that new information needed to be released, we should probably bring that back to this group for that discussion.
Sure.
Yeah.
Alex, Stone for the record. Did I hear you correct in saying that if there is an entity that had a claim against it, that they then would be required to take the examination again that year? I would be okay with that. I'm only getting about 70% of what the board says, so I'm not sure.
Sorry, Alex. No, that's not what I actually meant. I meant a change to the law in sexual assault or discrimination, the things that they would be testing on if the law actually changed related to the sections of the exam, to have them either be retested or just provided information as related to that, so that we could still mark them as passed to obtain a license after that.
I like that. I would even include if there is a complaint and it's verified that the complaint is comes back to be true. You know, well, if the investigators say, yeah, that was a legit complaint, they should then have to take their license again as well.
I'd agree with that too.
Okay. I have noted all of those recommended changes. All right.
And make them pay double.
Sure. Rule number 25905900060, application for licensure. Any concerns or opposition? Okay. And 25905900070, fees and payments.
Can I go back to the? Go for it, Ben.
Oh.
Ben Bauer for the record. All right, sorry. We'll get back to you in a minute, Alex. Yeah, so my only concern is, once again, $624 a year is a lot, especially with the executive manager fee that you have to pay every other year. So it's just all these fees really start to add up. I get that we have to pay for the administrative time, but it's still, I mean, it's just a lot of fees. So if there's ways that we can kind of double up and get more for our money, I'm all for that. I know that DPSST also needs money to operate. But I'm wondering if there's maybe ways we can get more money from the legislature for that, so we don't always have to be getting it from companies. But that's just my comments on that section.
And Alex, for the record, I'm just going back to the previous rule, 6-0, ending in 6-0. Me and definitely Mr. Nakasone on this call, being able to provide an accurate list of every single property. I have properties that have like 6 addresses in them, and so I just want to make sure that there's a little bit of. I don't want to get punished if I'm doing an entire block downtown. That entire block is owned by one entity, and I don't have every single address attached to that, like the Mexican consulate at the Forrester building. I would put the main address for the Forrester building, but I'm not going to put every single address and suite number of every single office and every single building. So I want to make sure that we're all on the same page here. We're right. Best efforts.
Yeah, I would piggyback off of that. I'd piggyback off that too, Alex. In reviewing a lot of the comments from constituents, there was one in there that was very lengthy dealing with this topic. And there were several other ones in there dealing with this topic as well, because you also go into some confidentiality issues if you're doing military contracts and things like that. I know we provided services for a company in Oregon that had a Navy contract that no one was supposed to know about. If we're listing security services there, that puts that at risk as well. So I think this is something that has to be more discussed, and I agree with what Alex says.
Okay, so I'm going to pop in here, Jennifer Howell, for the record, on the application and the requirement to provide the locations. We did work through a definition of what a work location is and what a work location isn't. It is appropriate to provide the main address for a complex. So let's talk about a hospital, for example. So they have a primary address that is their physical address, but they are complex because they have multiple buildings. So saying it is this hospital, this is the main address, we provide security for all of that hospital at that unit. There's also in the definition of workplace that example of providing an area. So if you're providing private security services to downtown, and you wanna say it's from this street to this street and this street to that street, and it encompasses all of that area. You can do it by that. As well as if there is information that is supposed to be protected from public disclosure, the application process has an attachment.
Mhm.
You provide your redacted copy of the information that the exemption from public records you're using to make sure that that is provided to DPSSD as protected information. So you have to provide the completed application and then the opportunity to provide a redacted application.
So didn't we already cover all of this and finalize all of this?
Yes.
Okay,
Chair,
so we are covering stuff we've already finalized, and it doesn't seem to be of an issue. It hasn't been, and we don't have any attestation to it. So I think for everybody's time, I think we move on.
I see a couple of hands. Can I have one follow-up question? Is that okay? Could we include the definition of locations in the rule for definitions ending in 10? Because then if I had that been in there, I would not even have brought this up.
Also, for the record, I think when we passed the temporary rule change to approve, this was also a topic of conversation at that time.
Ben Bauer, for the record, I definitely want to agree with that. This has been a contentious issue from the beginning, and it never has been resolved to anyone's complete agreement. I think that disclosing information about where we provide services and who has financial interest in our companies is no one's business but our companies. And when you talk about classification, the more eyes you have, you can fill out a thing, you can check a box, but if someone goofs up, now you're the one stuck holding the bag. So I definitely have a fundamental issue with both of those requirements, in addition to the overwhelming cost of of all these entity rules.
Well, and also, like, there was a member of a former administration, high-ranking political figure that came into town, and I was working with the former sheriff of Clark County. The event happened in Oregon. The event location wasn't disclosed until 4 hours until the event, but I had 6 guys on that detail. And so there's as long as the word locations is added to the definitions and it's broadened, I'm happy with that. And best efforts are added to that definition. I'm okay with it.
Susie, go ahead.
Committee members, I just wanted to bring to your attention what our process is as DPSST. So we had House Bill 2527, and we have worked through both our rules administration here, Jennifer Howell, and this committee to come through and review every single rule that you see before you today. And we've had multiple opportunities for public comment or discussion at this group. Where we are today is what is listed as the action item that we're looking for a vote to approve and move this forward to the board, including the attachment B that Jennifer has included with the documentation. As we're right now, what we're doing is we're going through each section of rule that you have already seen, you have already approved, you have already provided public comment related to this, and we need to have a rule set going to the board come April. So Jennifer, you've been making notes on some of these. Those are things that you can look at later, address to the group at another time as we go through and get rules approved by the board. Yes, we're looking for permanent rules, but rules, as you know, change and can change. And we can continue to have these discussions at a later time. But the goal today is to have you look at the action item and we go through and have an approval or not of these rules that Jennifer has presented today.
I think the discussion, though, is more for the context of this board prior to the group. So I think the conversation is appropriate because we don't want to pass rules that are not going to serve people well. And I understand there are timelines there. This panel didn't create those timelines. This law was passed a while ago. And so I think this discussion is very important. And I would rather have this discussion and prolong this process than pass rules that we have to go back and later change.
Ben Bauer for the record. If we take it in the context of what Susie is saying, then we have already voted this down and the issue is over and we can move on. We have decided that we don't want to adopt these rules, and that was what we voted for.
With the second motion, so we would need a motion to move forward. And we'll take it to the board, that's fine.
Okay, so should we continue going through the items and have a quick conversation, or?
I'll defer to you, but into the interest of time and what our actual processes are, we're not going to be rewriting these rules in hopes to get them back and to the board. Our goal is, the process is to get them to the board.
So as I understand it, we're not going to yea or nay parts of this. We're going to yea or nay the whole thing.
That is the process. The process is to go forward here, rather than the things that have already been approved are in this packet that Jennifer provided, and that's not for discussion.
Got it. Okay. So we entertained it for a little bit of time, and it's turning out to be too lengthy because we have done these exercises quite lengthy, and it has been. A lot of the same stuff has been discussed before, as is now with a lot of changes Jennifer has made. And Dane called for any comment, and we didn't get any comment, today we're getting comment. Is that kind of what it's stating?
There is comment that was included, but as far as to change it, yes.
Yeah, I'm not seeing those comments being reflected in what we just talked about, though, in a whole.
May I ask a quick question before we move on? And so for the sake of some of these suggestions and that this board is making, and you mentioned that we may have to go back through the legislature and look at changes. Is there an avenue for that? Is there a recommendation for that? Or is there a follow-up meeting that we would have where we would capture those and see if DPSST is willing to carry those forward? I mean, I realize it's a separate conversation, but is there a mechanism for that?
Susie Herring for the record. Currently, we're looking at rules, as you're aware, for any legislative change that would be not through DPSST. DPSST wouldn't necessarily put forward a legislative change for maybe some of the suggestions that are being brought forward. If there was some cleanup to the language in the statute, we do sometimes put legislative concepts through to make those changes, but those significant changes that have been brought forward today would not be put forward by DPSST. That would be for yourself doing that.
Okay,
but as far as rule change, yes. So the things that Jennifer has noted today that maybe we want to revisit, that's not a problem at all to bring that back to with some changes to that. It's what happened. We do it all the time.
Okay, so for edification and clarification, I just want to make sure we're talking about OAR and ORS. Those are two different things. We can't touch ORS at this point in this conversation with this committee. We can touch rule.
Yes.
And rule, if we can move forward with the rules, and we can change the rules often, because rules change often.
As long as it's within our statutory authority, as long as it carries out what we've been directed to do by the legislature. These rules were written to carry out what we were directed to do.
These rules make the OAR run.
Yes.
Okay. Or the ORS. So, give me a moment. I think that we will be able to address a lot of these topics because I do hear y'all, and there are some things that still need to be dealt with. I'm going to ask you to put it into writing so that everybody can see what those points are, because these meetings can be lengthy if we want them to. I don't think that we allow for it today. I would like to call for another vote today on the department recommendation, and if it's a yay, we'll move it forward. If it's a B, well, either way, yes or no, we are going to tell the board what this group is saying. So after we fleshed out a few things today, I think it's a little bit clearer now that we've got statute and a rule. We can adjust, well, we can't adjust statute. I just want to make sure we're clear on that. 2527, we cannot touch in this group. We can affect it in the future somehow in other ways. So for this rule right now, today, department recommendation, department recommends that the PSIPC approve a recommendation for the board on public safety standards and training to adopt the final text version of the rules for OIR Chapter 259, Division 59, as shown in this attachment B as the permanent rules for the private security entity licensing program. Can I get a motion to do that?
Chair, I make a motion.
Thank you. We have a motion. Can we get a second?
I'll second that motion. Samantha Schrantz for the record.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Can we call for vote?
So for the motion for board to adopt the final OIR Chapter 259, Division 59, Chair Lenzen?
Comment and vote. We are able to make any of the adjustments that we want to do in the future, so I vote aye.
Member Bauer?
Ben Bauer for the record. Just wanted to state previously that when we talked about this, it was in the context of a temporary rule. So now we're talking in the context of permanent rule. And so even if we agreed it in temporary, this is different. So I'm still a no.
Member Krager?
No.
Member Herrera?
Yes.
Member McGee?
I would have to piggyback off of what Ben said. When we originally decided to do this as a temporary, it was with understanding that we would have further discussions before going permanent. It sounds like those discussions are being pretty much canceled and we're forced, so my vote would be no.
Member Nakasone?
Also no.
Member Schrantz?
Aye.
Member Snyder?
Aye.
Member Stone?
Abstain.
Can't abstain.
Cannot abstain, Alex.
Unless she has a reason.
Alex, is it an aye or a nay?
When I pick up a new property this week, do I have to report that location? Is there an email, locations, dpsst@dpsst.org? I mean,
Jennifer,
I don't. Yeah.
At the time of application, the information is reported to DPSSD, and it's at the time of application. So then you wouldn't report any changes until the time of application for renewal. But you would maintain the records that you have had that property.
But I can give general locations, right? Like I can say, like, this school district. Because I have an entire school district, right? I can just say.
Well, I think for clarity for the school district, you probably have to list each school.
And am I gonna get in trouble if I forget an address? One address? Are y'all gonna like, what's the fine for forgetting an address?
That is not the intent.
Well, I know that's. I don't think. I think we all know that. I think everyone in here has a good heart and good intentions. At least I believe that I do, and I'm just concerned that. I mean, I don't want to get hurt and penalized because I literally have thousands of locations and I forget an address. I mean, because there's going to be addresses I pick up and drop within that licensing year. There's like, I might do a concert or I might pick up a congregation.
That's entirely recognized by the process. So at the time that you're submitting your application, you draw whatever report you needed to identify what you have, and you would submit it with that. I can backtrack on the intent of what that legislative requirement is about, and it's a level of employee protection. It's not about trying to know who you're providing services to for your business part. It's an employee protection part, knowing where those employees are being sent to go and work, because sometimes those are isolated places, those are night shifts. It's an employee protection aspect. It's not about the state knowing your business.
And as I understand it, the list occurs at the beginning of the application, and you keep updating it. This is one time.
Just submit it to DPSST at the time of application, and then maintain your internal records throughout the year in case there is a compliance issue that comes up.
So then the answer, Alex, is that the information is in your records.
Yeah.
So is that an I or an A?
It's an I. I mean, I believe in these rules. I really think that we should add, if you're going to say that there was a whole discussion on the definition of locations, but that didn't get into the definition section of these rules, I feel like there was not due care taken in order to make sure that these were written very well. And I think that reflects poorly upon us as a board when I have to go out into the community as someone that's well known and I get questions about this. I have to admit that no, we did a good job. We really did a great job. And I like to, as well as I think the majority of the individuals here, we like to pride ourselves on delivering results for people. We're a service-based industry. And I believed in these rules. I just wish that we could have made them amazing and not just okay. But I'm going to vote aye because I'm a law enforcement guy. I'm a regulation guy. I'm a compliance guy. I'm also a former Teamster. I'm a former board member of the FOP. I believe in employee protections, but I really think that I suggested this in the last meeting, and I'm going to say it again. I will dedicate myself to being on a subcommittee that will go back and redraft and reevaluate these rules in order to make them more universal and more uniform so that the regulations are better, not worse.
Let's talk, Alex. Okay. Anybody else? Right.
Motion carried.
Motion carries. All right. So we are on to agency update.
I'll chime in after you're done.
Okay. Kathy, did you want to say anything before I go? Also checking in with you.
Yeah, other than just to introduce myself, sorry you guys, I'm just under the weather, so I'm doing it remote. For those who I haven't met, Kathy McAlpine, I'm the new director of professional standards. I come with 37 years of law enforcement experience in the last 6.5 years as the police chief of Tigard. So, thankfully, Susie, is well versed in this. So it's allowed me to kind of understand the rest of professional standards. Just listening to this committee and working towards trying to give you all the tools and information as possible. I'm here and I'll work with Susie on this, but just appreciate your guys' time and effort as we work through these. Take it away, Susie.
Okay, thank you. Several updates for you, Susan Herring, for the record. Wanted to report to you on our success with Ring Central. That's our new phone system that we're using for the program. So people can call in and select who they want to talk to based upon what their needs are, whether it's entity or compliance or processing or manager training. Just a report to kind of give folks an idea. I ran the report for just last month, well, the last 30 days, which ended up being 24 business days. We had 2,046 calls, which averaged to about 85 calls a day. So to give you a little perspective on the high volume of calls that we get in daily. We did hire a new learning and development specialist, Steve Huzenga, and he started January 8th. And he will be working on his first priority of business is the ARM professional curriculum. We also have him attending the DPSST instructor development course, and we will be hosting our next instructor development course the 1st of April. I know that's a ways away, but we've got to get him acclimated to the curriculum that's being taught. We have some help with our Policing Excellence for that course as well. And we will take 20 and put those individuals into that class. We have a wait list of about 63 individuals right now, so I know it's going to take some time to get through that, but we'll get the first group going in April. We have Carissa still helping a little bit with some of that training element, but you'll start to see her back with compliance and having some conversations with her. I do have a posting for a temporary employee to come in and help process applications, and that closes on the 26th of this month. If you have anybody that's interested. We have updated private security entity forms here and there as conversations have been happening as we started running the program. So those are all updated, and we constantly send out notifications via GovDelivery what has happened as far as what is being updated, so everyone's aware what's out there. Our last GovDelivery message, Ben took that on and sent it out, that we do have an IRIS page for private security entities, and that went up last week, so individuals can go in and find those entities that are certified. Let's see, we did make an update to our webpage also to include not only application processing, but any other mail that's coming in that's related to a deficiency. So there's a couple of different timelines for that, but those are getting updated daily. We still have technically a vacancy for the board position, but we should have affirmation of that. Shelby, is that May or April? May. So it missed the February group, so we're hoping and keeping our fingers crossed for May, and then that would be our vice chair for this policy committee. And lastly, I just wanted to remind everybody that we still have 2 vacancies on this policy committee aside from the board position, and that is one for healthcare and one for the public position. So please, as committee members, share that information out in your communities, and the application is online, and those folks can submit those to Samantha, and we'll go through those and look at those. And that's all I have for an update.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, Phil Castle, Agency Director for the record. First thing I want to say is thank you all very much for serving on this committee. I try to get to all the committees. I've been here just about a year now, and this is a big deal. What you're doing here in this room, you're doing for the whole state of Oregon. It's quite a commitment on your part. It takes a lot of time to do this and a lot of consideration, and you have to think kind of outside of yourself when you do this work. It's very, very challenging, and I get to sit in the back and just watch it. So I don't want to take that for granted, and I want to very much recognize you all for doing this very challenging work. DPSST is under a massive amount of change at this time, and in all places and areas. I'm super grateful that we have Kathy McAlpine, who has joined us for the Professional Standards Director position, and she is filling some tough shoes to fill behind her predecessor, Susie, as you all know, but they're going to be a great team going forward. We have right now on this campus a record number of students and people that are on this campus, and if you were here in person, you'd see how full our parking lot is right now. I'm told by the end of March we'll have 6 extra spaces remaining, which is fantastic, and not. So the good news is that we will be dialing down that as we get into April and May and June. our volumes are going to decrease a little bit as we have attained statute for our basic police training, which is a great success for us right now. The good news about that is agency resources and space start to become a little bit more available for different types of training here and events. And we like to consider ourselves the home for all law enforcement and all public safety. And if we have the space, we want to give the space. So I just wanted to share that with you. The governor has added, if you have not seen it, she has 3 priorities. She's added a 4th, and on that 4th is public safety. And she's officially added that. She's publicized that as one of her priorities. So we are working with her very closely right now on our 25-27 strategies, which is unusual. Usually that process is delayed. She is starting it early. When she first took office, she came in, right before the governor's recommended budget was due, which gave her 0 time to understand the lay of the land and how she could support agencies and different constituents groups across the state. And now she is doing it plenty early so she can get a better view of that. And as we build those strategies with the governor's office, we'll make those transparent to you and let you know, but I'll just tell you that we are working on things in all spaces and all disciplines within the organization. So more to come. And as you hear, and Susie gave you the update, we're putting things in place, at least temporarily, to provide better service and faster service, which is our goal. As an agency, we are customer focused. It is part of our strategic plan, and we mean it. So we want to give good customer service, and we're doing everything we can to do that. So pending your questions, Mr. Chair, that's all I have. Thank you again.
So I'm gonna put this to the rest of the board. Y'all got it right here. You got questions? Oh, crickets.
My brief was so good.
Wow.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm gonna call for good of the order. Any good of the order from you? Hearing none, I will close this meeting. Next meeting, May 14th. Thank you all for your